welcome to the EUFIC Yamonet project. Today we have Mrs. Carmen Picón, who is a worker in the European Central Bank. Thank you, Carmen, for sharing with us this video interview. I would like to make you some questions related with your professional life and your work in the European Central Bank. What has it meant for you to participate in European Union, in European project Yamonet?
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me. Has been a very good experience to transmit what we do in a European institution like the ECB to students, in Spain in particular. So to me it was a very nice experience and a new one, totally new for me.
I am sure that for a Spanish student too. So might you explain us briefly which has been your professional career development and training?
Well, first of all, I get my licenciatura here in Spain, in Valladolid, licenciada en Económicas. Afterward, I started to work in Banco de España for almost 9 years. And then after 9 years in Banco de España working in the investment on reserve assets, I moved to Frankfurt where the ECB was starting, and it was a completely new adventure for most of the Europeans, so I thought that it was a perfect moment to join the Euro area, the ECB. And since then I have been working there. I moved to the area of statistics, working for the balance of payments, and in the last 13 years I became an expert in balance of payments, working with different international institutions like the IMF, Eurostat, the ECB.
Okay, and where are you currently working and which are your responsibilities in the European Central Bank?
So I'm working in the Department of Statistics, in the External Statistics Division. My responsibilities are mainly to produce balance of payments at the monthly and quarterly frequency, international investment position, and the reserve assets, and keep the methodology and work with the central banks of the Euro area in improving the consistency in methodology.
It seems that it's a hard work and technical work.
It is technical, but it's also a lot of social stuff, communication, to work with all the countries with different cultures. It's a very interesting experience.
Mm-hmm. Which one would you consider as a key of your professional success?
The key is to be very optimistic. I mean, the lucky people doesn't exist without trying and trying and trying. So you have always to try new things and not be happy. I mean, be happy, but always try to fight and to try new things.
Yeah, and we are in an university environment. So I would like that you translate to our students what you recommend undergraduates to begin their professional career.
What I recommend to the students is the time in the university probably is unique. It will not happen again. So it's the age, it's the experience, the friends, but also the knowledge that you get is not going to happen again. So enjoy the moment, but get the best from these years, and then try to be prepared to learn new things, because this is the moment, and I say it's unique.
Yeah, okay. You have explained us in your speech during your lecture that you work in the statistics department. How do you elaborate those statistics, and which are your sources, and how often do you publish them?
So we elaborate the statistics of balance of payments for the Euro area based on the data that the central banks of the Euro area are providing us. We work with them to get, as I said, very consistent and homogeneous data, because this is the fundamental of a good product at the level of the Euro area. And we publish data monthly of balance of payments and reserve assets, and quarterly for this international investment position and balance of payments. We also publish harmonized competitiveness indicators exchange rates, indexes. So we publish a lot of information related to external statistics.
Which one do you think is the most difficult part of your work in that field?
The most difficult sometimes is to work with different cultures, because although it's super interesting and it's probably the issue that make your working day different one from the other, because you work with different cultures and with different problems. But sometimes this is probably the most challenging.
As a European Central Bank worker, might you describe us briefly how it is structured and functioning? Which are the objectives of the European Central Bank?
So the structure of the ECB is we have a president, a vice president, and we have four members of the executive board. All of them has different business areas behind them. There are, I don't know how many directorates, a lot right now, probably more than 20. Statistics is one of these directorates. Under every directorate there is divisions. Statistics have six currently divisions, and then it's the staff. So this is more or less the structure, and it's very horizontal. It's not very hierarchy. And the fundamental mission of the ECB is to keep the stability of the prices.
And which is your personal opinion about its functioning, goals and achievements?
My personal opinion?
Yeah.
So we are a central bank, and these are the functions that we have to, are totally decentralized from the central banks of the countries of the euro area. So there are the functions of a central bank. There is no difficult to have a personal opinion.
But do you think that this a fundamental institution in the European Union? You think that the European Central Bank is important in the structure and the functioning of the European Union?
I think it's key in the euro area, also in the European Union, and I think what is very relevant is the prestige that the ECB has in Europe.
You have talked about the balance of payments, current account, capital account, and financial account. Ronaldo functioning? Explain more about this question.
During the seminar, I introduced the picture of Ronaldo in connection with the capital account, because it's the way to get the attention of the students, of course. But I think sometimes it's difficult to put some practical examples of which type of transactions you can include in the balance of payments. And the issue of Ronaldo was that it is a kind of transaction of capital account, because it's just the transference from a football club in a country of a player that belongs to another football club in another country. The purchase of the transference of this service for the future, it is a balance of payments transaction, and it's a capital account transaction.
I think that it was a good point for Spanish students, your example. Which countries make commercial operations without banking transfers? Because you told us during your speech that is one of the difficulties when the companies don't use the banking transfer, and it's difficult to register the operations in the...
One of the problems of the balance of payments is to cover all the economy, to cover all the transactions, and this coverage is in particular a problem when there are sectors different from banks making these transactions in the economy. And the problem with all these companies that are not banks, that are now exporting, importing, and making the payments outside the banking system, is that it's more difficult to cover, to get this information. So this is something that is happening more and more in the economies, and I think it's a global problem. And there is not a particular country with this issue. It's a general problem.
And another core things that you talk about during this morning in your lecture is about the mirror data. It was an interesting point, included for me. Could you explain what's the meaning of mirror data and why we don't know exactly which countries buy our public debt?
Well, the main problem for the balance of payments, and in particular for portfolio investment, and it's a problem that has been in the news in the last years, is who holds the debt of a country, and especially the case of with the Greece crisis, who was holding the bonds issued by the government of Greece. We don't know, and so the government of Greece doesn't know, and the statisticians, we do not know. How you can get information, how can you get a proxy? And the idea is to use this mirror data. What that means, that the countries know the assets that they have. They know, for example, in the case of Spain knew how much bonds issued by the Greek government was held by Spanish residents, because from the assets point of view, you know who has issued your assets. But in the liabilities, this is the problem, that as soon as the bonds go to the secondary market, it's impossible to know who is the real holder. So the idea is that if you use this mirror data from all the countries and you trust that it's a good quality of data and homogeneous, so you make the addition of all these mirror data, all these assets, and then you can understand who is holding your liabilities. This is the idea. But to use mirror data, you have to trust in the systems of the countries that are producing this data, this information, and this comparable information. And with this, then you can at least we think there is a very good proxy, and this is something that we use in Europe because we more or less understand that our countries are really, really consistent when producing this type of information.
And finally, you have talked about the new implemented manual of the balance of payments. What is new in it?
There are a lot of
things,
new.
but remark the main points about
Well, the most important thing is that this new update, that by the way, it was published already in 2009, and we have need, at least in Europe, 5 years to implement. So you can imagine that it's not peanuts, the changes. I would say that the most important thing was the idea of globalization in the production. So the idea that there were a lot of companies that they were sending parts of the process of production to other countries, but they were not really an export and import. So an import first of a piece of a product to another country to finish some production and coming back. In the previous manual, these type of transactions were considered imports and exports of an economy, while now it's not considered neither an export nor an import, because it is considered part of the channel of production, and because this product doesn't change the ownership. The idea is that if there is no change in ownership, it doesn't matter if the good cross the border, there is no export and there is no import. So the new manual really defines a transaction when there is a change of ownership and not when there is a cross-border transaction or something just changing, passing by the border. This is probably one of the most important things. Another thing is, well, the terminology in general has been changed a little bit and tried to be more homogeneous with national accounts, because it was like we were talking completely different languages. Now the idea is that we converged a little bit, we became a little bit more consistent, and the idea that there are, insurance companies or a lot of companies that have become really global. There are a lot of international transactions between this type of companies, pension funds, so try really to cover better and to define better all these sectors and instruments.
Okay, thank you so much, Carmen, for visiting us. and I hope to see you again, of course. Thank you.